So, welcome to this e-session on feedback. I had hoped to run a session in a lecture theatre with you, but I'm afraid I'm going to be away in Oxford at a conference, interestingly enough, on teaching and learning, and so we're going to have to do it this way instead. Exactly as it was when we met face to face. I'm Andy Adcroft. I teach strategy in School of Management, and the rest you probably know already. Let's think about feedback then. We can start by thinking about what exactly it is that we mean when we talk about feedback, because it's a word that academics like me use all the time when I'm talking to students or when I'm talking about students, but I'm not sure that as academics we spend enough time explaining what it is when we talk about feedback. Now, one of the most influential writers on management of the past 20 years, Peter Senge, talks about feedback in the context of learning. He says that organisations and people can only really learn when they receive feedback about their performance. Now, when he talks about feedback, Senge is talking about information related to your performance which can be used to improve your performance in the future. So in simple terms, feedback is information that we have which can help us improve what we do. In the case of students in universities, we're talking about a mechanism which will help you learn and so get better marks in assignments, exams, projects, and pretty much everything else that you do. Now, last year we did a study of feedback across the school. We had over 600 students involved, 80 members of staff took part in the study, and I've put a copy of it in ULearn for you to have a look at. We're also going to repeat the study probably in the new year, and if we did, it would be really great if you could get involved in that. Anyway, the study told us a number of things about feedback practices, and the most important of these things was that feedback is the main mechanism which helps students learn. The feedback that you get, and crucially what you do with it, helps you learn much more than lectures, seminars, tutorials, assignments, exams, asking questions in class, contribution to discussions, doing work in ULearn, and almost everything else that you do. But it also told us that we're not always great at giving feedback, and it also told us that you're not always great at doing the right kind of things with the feedback that you get. And so we have these video clips and some of the resources in ULearn for you to use. So let's start with basics. We know what feedback is, and this means that the only purpose of feedback, is to help students learn, which means that feedback has got to do three things. First, feedback should help clarify what is good and what is bad in what you've done. It should help you identify the strengths and the weaknesses of your work, for example. Second, feedback should help explain where there are gaps in your knowledge and understanding, what you could and should have done differently, for example, again, in writing an essay. And finally, feedback should help you reflect on yourself and your own performance, and it should help you self-develop. What matters with feedback is often not what we say, but much rather what you do. Now, if these three things are in place, if we do our bit and kind of you do your bit, then feedback should make a real contribution to improving your performance. Now, it sounds simple, but unfortunately it doesn't always work like this. In many cases, and for many students, feedback is something completely separate and unrelated to their performance. You do well in spite of the feedback that you get, much more so than because of the feedback that you get. And the outcome of that is that often students don't reach their full potential. So, as we've said before, your time at university is stuffed full of opportunities for learning and self-development, and our job is to make sure that you can take advantage of as many of them as possible. Now, the main reason why feedback doesn't always work in this way is that frequently people don't even know when they are getting feedback. Too many students, for example, think feedback is something that only happens after you get an assignment returned, or that feedback only happens in written form. But feedback happens all the time, and so you need to make sure that you are attuned to the different types of feedback that you get. Ask a question in class and get an answer, and that is feedback. Stop and chat in a corridor with one of your lecturers for 5 minutes, that's feedback. Discuss something from class with a friend or in a study group, again, that's feedback. If you read something or see something in the newspapers or on TV that questions an opinion that you view, that you hold, that's feedback. So as I said, feedback happens all of the time. So feedback takes many forms: formal and informal, verbal and written, and so on and so on and so on. Now, the two types of feedback that we're going to focus on are, first, formal feedback that we give you and what you're supposed to do with it, and second, feedback that you get yourself about yourself. So there's some video clips, some PowerPoint slides, odds and sods of other things in You Learn For You. Please engage with them, because we think they'll prove really useful.